Curls might be the most overrated bicep exercise, and I never thought I'd say that. For years, I tried almost every curl variation imaginable. Heavy curls, incline, preacher. Eventually, they all started to feel like the same exercise. Then I found one movement that completely changed how my biceps felt after training. At first, I thought it looked ridiculous. Now it's one of the few exercises I'd actually choose over curls. So what made me change my mind? The truth is, curls do work. If you're new to training, almost any curl variation will build muscle as long as you're getting stronger over time. That's exactly why I spent years chasing heavier weights, convincing myself that the next variation would finally make a noticeable difference. But after a while, I realized I wasn't really introducing a new stimulus. I was just changing the angle of the same movement. The goal was always the same: bend the elbow and lift the weight. The exercise looked different, but the challenge felt surprisingly familiar. That was the moment I started paying less attention to what an exercise looked like and more attention to what it actually demanded from my biceps. Every curl gave me a solid contraction, every curl produced a pump, and every curl left me feeling like I'd trained hard. Yet once the workout was over, none of them stood out enough to make me think, that felt completely different. They all blended together, and I couldn't help but wonder if I was simply rotating between variations instead of exposing my biceps to a genuinely new challenge. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I'd been judging exercises by how popular they were instead of what they actually offered. Curls had become the default answer for bigger biceps, so I never questioned whether there was another movement that could load the muscle in a way they couldn't. The problem wasn't the variation at all. Maybe I was asking my biceps to grow without ever understanding what actually makes them grow in the first place. To answer that, I had to stop thinking about exercises and start thinking about the muscle itself. Most people see the biceps as a muscle that simply bends the elbow, and that's exactly how most workouts are built. But the biceps do more than that. They also cross the shoulder, which means the position of your arm can completely change how the muscle is loaded throughout an exercise. That's why two movements can both be called bicep exercises, yet feel nothing alike. One might create a great contraction in the middle of the rep, while another challenges the muscle most when it's fully lengthened. Over the last few years, research has consistently shown that training muscles in a loaded stretch can be a powerful stimulus for growth. And once I understood that, I started looking at my workouts differently. Instead of searching for another curl variation, I started searching for an exercise that could expose my biceps to something they weren't already getting. And that's when I found a movement I'd barely ever seen anyone do. The exercise was the Pelican Curl. The first time I saw someone doing it, I honestly thought it looked more like a shoulder mobility drill than a serious bicep exercise. You're leaning forward with your hands fixed behind you, lowering your body under control before pulling yourself back up. It doesn't resemble a traditional curl at all, which is probably why most people ignore it. I decided to try it anyway, and within the first few reps, I understood why it felt so different. Instead of the resistance building as I curled a dumbbell toward my shoulder, my entire body weight was stretching my biceps before they had to contract. It was a completely different sensation from anything I'd experienced with a barbell or dumbbells. The movement was also far more demanding than it looked. There was nowhere to swing the weight, no momentum to hide behind. Every rep forced me to stay in control, especially at the bottom where my biceps were under the greatest stretch. That first session didn't convince me it was better than curls. It convinced me it was different, and that difference made me want to understand what was actually happening, because the feeling alone wasn't enough to explain why it challenged my biceps in a way years of curling never had. At first, I assumed the difference was just novelty, that anything new would feel harder in the beginning and eventually settle into the same pattern as every other curl variation I had tried. But that never really happened. Even after multiple sessions, the tension it created felt consistently different, especially in the bottom position where the stretch on the biceps was unavoidable. With traditional curls, that range is usually the least demanding part of the lift, almost a transition before the real effort begins. Here, it was the opposite. The deeper I lowered, the more resistance I felt, as if the muscle was being challenged exactly where it had always been least exposed. That alone changed how I started looking at bicep training. Most curl variations are built around shortening the muscle under load, which means the hardest part is usually near the top of the movement when you're squeezing the contraction. But in the Pelican Curl, the emphasis shifts completely. The challenge starts in the stretched position, forcing the biceps to produce force from a range they are rarely trained in. It doesn't just feel different. It exposes a weakness that standard curls tend to avoid. Over time, that difference became hard to ignore. The soreness felt deeper and more specific, not just in the usual places I would expect from curls. It wasn't about chasing a better pump anymore, but about realizing how little time my biceps actually spent under meaningful tension in a fully lengthened position. And that raised a simple question. If most of my progress was coming from mid-range work, what would happen if I actually trained the position I was avoiding without realizing it? But there is a catch. The Pelican Curl isn't something you just jump into the same way you would a normal curl variation. The position demands a level of shoulder control and strength that most people don't have right away, and rushing it can turn a very effective stimulus into something that simply feels unstable and uncomfortable. That's why progression matters more here than almost anything else. You don't start with load. You earn the range first, then build from there. And that's really the key idea behind everything in this video. It's not about replacing curls overnight or throwing away what already works. It's about understanding when a movement stops giving you anything new, and when it's time to introduce a different kind of stimulus altogether. By the way, if you're looking for a complete weighted calisthenics program that tells you when to progress, how much weight to add, and what split to use, I made a simple system down below. It will help you gain insane strength that translate into calisthenics skills and build an incredible aesthetic physique. Feel free to check it out. And if you're interested in the exact way the Pelican Curl fits into a full bicep training approach, I'll break that down in the next video. Pelican Curls build a different kind of biceps.